Welcome! This video is a full summary and explanation of Shakespeare's dark but great play, Macbeth. Ah, Macbeth. The word alone strikes fear in the heart and sends chills up your spine. Make no mistake, this is a dark play. Dark, ominous, scary, ugly, but it is a fantastic play. But the play itself it's so dark, it is thought to be cursed. Among actors and people in the theater community, they think there's a superstition on the play itself, and they won't even utter the name of the play. Instead, they refer to it as that Scottish play to avoid saying the name. And productions of the play have a long history of being plagued with calamities, like it flops on opening night, or people have died, or there's a riot, it causes a riot. Even Laurence Olivier, the great actor, was almost crushed to death by a falling stage weight. So the play has a history of being spooky and cursed. And let me ask you, do you have the guts to watch the rest of this video? I can't protect you. You're on your own. The reason that the play is so dark is because it explores the dark and evil side of human nature. The play is about ambition, getting what you want and asking, what would you do to get what you want? Yeah? And think about that for yourself. What would you do to get what you want? Would you cheat? Would you lie? Would you throw your best friend under the bus so you could get ahead? Would you kill? Now, hopefully you wouldn't kill, but for Macbeth, all bets are off. Who knows what this guy's gonna do? Now, Macbeth is a towering play among plays worldwide. It has been produced in all sorts of countries by the greatest actors and directors of our time. Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh did a famous production. Orson Welles did a production. Roman Polanski made a film of it. So did the Japanese director Kurosawa, made a film of it. So this spans the globe with all sorts of prominent actors and directors. And it's not only actors and directors. It has influenced a lot of people, like, for example, President Abraham Lincoln. In fact, he said, "Nothing equals Macbeth." And there's some interesting scholarship actually on his fascination with the play, including him reciting lines from Macbeth in the middle of the Civil War. Interesting stuff. So, and it's also influenced music, for example. Verdi turned it into an opera. Strauss wrote a piece on it. And Beethoven, the Beethoven, as in Ludwig van, he wrote a piece about it that's called The Ghost. I'm not making this up. In fact, there's a great video of it on YouTube. If you're a classical music fan, or even if you're not, go to YouTube, plug in the search for Beethoven, The Ghost, and it'll come up. It is an amazing recording. Isaac Stern is on the violin. He is one of the world's greatest violinists. Yo-Yo Ma is on the cello. He's one of the world's greatest cellists. And the footage is amazing. There's all these close-ups of these guys, emoting, and it is fantastic. Although you gotta go to the second movement. It's in 3 movements. You gotta go to the second movement. That's where it shifts into D minor, this dark, ominous key, and it gets really slow. It's amazing. But sorry, I digress. Back to Macbeth, the play. So it was written by Shakespeare in around 1600, so that's 400 years ago. But the amazing thing about it is still relevant today. Often when I go to movies or read books, one of the measures of how much I liked it and how great it is how much I think about it afterwards. And there are so many movies today where even if I enjoy the movie in the theater, I walk out, I don't ever think about it again. I don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it with my friends. It's done. But Macbeth, it is so relevant. It just makes you think about the characters and the things and the way it was presented, and it makes you think about your life and today and what's going on in the world. It is really amazing. So that is what you are in store for here with Macbeth. I will take you through the story. I'll tell you the story. It's a great story as it unwinds. I'll also explain it and give you some context as well. So without any further ado, let's get to it. So pretend you're in the theater. The house lights come down. A hush comes over the crowd. And the curtain goes up. The play opens with a spectacular scene. Okay? There are 3 witches. Shakespeare calls them the weird sisters. These 3 witches, and they're all sitting around, and they're sort of haggled, and they're snarly toothed, and they're sort of cackling, and they've got hoods on, and they're all weird and ominous. And here's how it opens. One of the witches says, these are the opening lines of the play. One of the witches says, "When shall we 3 meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?" Witch number 2. "When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won." Okay, so right off the bat, you're like, whoa, the play opens with witches, and these witches are talking about thunder, lightning, rain, hurly-burly, which is like tumultuousness, and a battle, and lost and won, and okay, right away you know you are in for a dark ride, all right? So they say a few more things, and then at the end, all 3 witches join together in unison and say this line to close the scene. "Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air." Close scene. Okay, so you know right away, foul is fair and fair is foul. There's going to be foul play here, and there's filthy air. Everything is just bad about it. So this initial scene, not only is it exciting and intriguing, but it also frames the entire play. It tells you what you're in for. Okay, then the next scene. We meet our hero, Macbeth. Macbeth is with his buddy, his best friend, Banquo. They are both noblemen, or they call them thanes, which is a title in Scotland, like a duke. And so they're both thanes, they're both noblemen, and they're both returning from battle, where they have just defeated the enemy. And they were both amazingly honorable and brave on the battlefield, particularly Macbeth, but also Banquo. And if it weren't for Macbeth, they wouldn't have won the war. So Macbeth's heroism on the battlefield saved Scotland. And now they were both on their way back from the battlefield to meet the king. And the king wants to, praise them and thank them for their glory on the battlefield. On their way back to meet the king, they encounter the 3 witches. So they're like, whoa, what are you guys? Are you of this planet? Are you spirits? Are you real? What are you? And the witches give them prophecies. The witches tell Macbeth that he will become the Thane of Cawdor, which is an additional title. Okay? Pretty good. The witches also say, Macbeth, you will become king. King! Pretty good. The witches turn to Macbeth's friend, Banquo, and they say, Banquo, you're not going to be king, but your children and your heirs will be king. Wow, that's pretty good too. So Macbeth's saying, wait a minute, me, the Thane of Cawdor? Really? And king? Really? Me? Little old Macbeth? So he says, wait a second. He turns to the witches and he says, hold on a second. Well, I need to get to the bottom of this. Who are you guys? What's going on? I need some answers. And the witches, poof, vanish, gone. So not getting any answers out of them. So they turn to each other. Macbeth says to Banquo, hey, you must be pretty excited here. Are you pretty happy that your kids are, gonna be king? What do you make of this whole thing? And Banquo warns Macbeth. He says, dude, don't listen to these witches, right? The agents of evil have a way of tempting people, right? They make things look promising at the beginning, but really they're only giving you half-truths and trouble, and if you end up following that and going down that road, it will only lead to your destruction. So just forget about what these witches said. Macbeth, on the other hand, can't let it go, right? He starts thinking, me, Thane of Cawdor, and me, king. King! I could be king! Wow, this is pretty good. And then all of a sudden, he can't believe the thoughts that he's thinking, but he's thinking that he could be king by murdering the existing king. And those thoughts scare him. He's like, whoa, what am I even thinking here? And he says, all right, you know what? Hold on. If I'm going to be king, if fate has it that I'm going to be king, then it's just going to happen. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to take these crazy actions. I'm just going to let things be the way they are. Okay? That's how he leaves it. So this whole encounter with the witches, of the witches telling Macbeth you could be king, and then Macbeth saying, it raises a theme throughout the play, which is Macbeth really a bad guy, inherently bad? Or is he this great guy, but the witches made him do it? And I think where you kind of have to come out is that, you don't really know for sure, but it seems that Macbeth was inclined to do it. Okay, now would he have done it without the witches? Who knows? But if you look in contrast, his buddy Banquo heard the same thing, but Banquo said, no, I'm not listening to these witches, and Macbeth, you shouldn't either. So Banquo's sort of a model of honor. Macbeth could have done the same thing, but he doesn't. He starts thinking about and wanting to aspire to the throne, okay? So then Macbeth and Banquo, off they go to see the king. So Macbeth and Banquo meet up with the king, and the king of Scotland is a good and benevolent and kind and honorable king, and he runs a great, country, and everybody loves him and everybody's happy with him. So the king welcomes Macbeth and Banquo and says, hey, thank you so much for your valiance on the battlefield. And then Macbeth then showers him with all these words like, oh, king, it was my duty. I'm in your service. I am just your humble servant. I love you. I honor you. I will be loyal to you. I will always protect you. Now, keep in mind that this is the guy who just before was thinking to himself, if I could murder the king, I would then accede to the throne. This is just one example, and the play has many throughout the play of Macbeth being deceitful and duplicitous. It's wonderful stuff. So the king, thanks them for their honor, and the king says, and because you fought so hard, I am going to make you, Macbeth, the Thane of Cawdor. Okay? This is exactly what the witches prophesized. So he looks at Banquo and he says, and you too, Banquo, you are welcome in my regime, and both of you guys are going to be favored guys, and you'll have a great career under me. Okay? And he says, and as long as I'm appointing people, my son over here, I'm going to appoint my son Prince, and therefore he is now in the next line to succeed me to the throne. He will be the next king. Okay? So Macbeth starts thinking to himself, I just got made Thane of Cawdor. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. And that's exactly what those witches said. So maybe it's true. Maybe what they said is going to be true. But then Macbeth says, but wait a minute. What was that other thing the king said? His son has just gotten named prince? So that means his son is next in line for the throne? And Macbeth thinks to himself, wait a second. His son is now in my way. So he thinks to himself, either I need to do something, take some action to, leapfrog this guy's son, or just do nothing, sit back and accept fate as it is. Maybe I'll be king, maybe I won't, but whatever it is, it is. And then he says to himself, let me read this to you. Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. Okay. So basically what that means is the stars in the night, I hope you go out right now so that there's no light, so no one can see my deep and dark desires. And then he goes on to say, and my eyes, I will hide my eyes from seeing what my hands are doing. Because if my eyes can see what my hands are doing, they won't be able to bear it. Okay? So this kind of suggests he's not going to just sit back and let nothing happen, that he's going to take some action here. Okay? So then the king says, all right, in celebration of this great day, and everybody's now gotten promoted, let's go back to Macbeth's castle. Let's all celebrate there, have dinner, and we'll all spend the night. And Macbeth says, sure, come on back to my place. It'll be a great celebration. And he dashes off a letter to his wife saying, telling her that they're coming back to the castle. His wife is Lady Macbeth. So we see Lady Macbeth, and she is home in her castle. She is reading the letter that her husband has written her. Now, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have this great relationship. They're totally in love. It's full of passion. And he refers to her as his dearest partner of greatness. I love that. So they're close. She's his confidant. They're young, they're wealthy. He's a thane. They've got this castle. They have everything going for them, in this great, close relationship. So she's reading this letter, and in the letter, he describes that he ran into these witches, and the witches said that he could become king. She says, my husband could become king. Now she starts thinking about it. She's like, yeah, that would be great. And he'd be king, I'd be queen. We would have this awesome thing together. Oh my God, this is fantastic. But all of a sudden she starts worrying, but wait a minute, my husband, Macbeth, I'm not sure he's got what it takes in order to grab the throne. Okay? Here's what she says. She says, yet I do fear thy nature, the nature of her husband. Yet I do fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness. Okay? So she's saying he is too kind in order to do what it takes to grab the throne. And she goes on, right? She says, he could be a great king. Indeed, he would be a great king, but he doesn't have the meanness and the ruthlessness in order to grab power. He desires the throne, which is good. That's a good thing. But he wants to get there in a good way and without lying or cheating to get there. In fact, he's afraid to do the things that it would take in order to get there. So that's what she's saying about her husband. Then a servant comes in and says, Lady Macbeth, the king is coming over for dinner tonight. And she says, what? The king's coming over for dinner? She freaks out. No, I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. The servant says, he's coming. You better get ready. Okay, we got to get ready. But almost immediately, she recognizes this. Wait a minute, the king? The king is coming over here tonight? Whoa, this is an opportunity. And she refers to his entrance into her home as fatal. So she's thinking about death also and killing the king in order to get to the throne, all right? So she then starts worrying a little bit that she wants to summon the spirits, the evil spirits, to give her the courage to do what it takes. Now let me read this to you to give you a flavor of what she says here. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, meaning turn me from a woman into a man to give me the courage of a man, and fill me from the crown to the toe top, full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose. My deadly purpose. Okay? And she goes on, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to give you a flavor. She goes on, she says, you spirits, you evil spirits, come to my woman's breast and turn my milk into vile poison. Okay? She says, come out, you evil spirits, come out from wherever you are, you evil demons, from wherever you're hiding, waiting to do evil. And let the thick night bring the darkest smoke from hell and cover everything, so that my sharp knife cannot see the wounds that it creates, and the goodness of heaven cannot peer through this dark smoke to then cry out for me to stop. Okay? She is ready to go. So the king and all his men arrive at the castle of Macbeth. And he's with a bunch of noblemen and his whole retinue. And one of the noblemen he's with is a guy by the name of Macduff. And I mention Macduff because we will learn more about him later. So the king comes up to Lady Macbeth, who comes out to greet him. And the king says, hey, thanks for having us over, Lady Macbeth. And Lady Macbeth then showers him in this flowery language, similar to what Macbeth did previously. She says, "Oh, King, it is just my honor to have you. I am just your humble servant. I'm honored to be in your service, and my home and everything in my home is at your disposal," meaning you should feel at home, and thus the implication is that you're safe. Okay? And remember, this was a lady who moments ago was just thinking about murdering the king. And now she's like, "Oh, come on in, you'll be safe." Right? The deceitfulness and duplicity here is amazing. So the king and his men all come in and get settled. Lady Macbeth then goes to Macbeth, pulls him over to the side and says, "Macbeth, dude, you look worried. You can't look worried. You gotta play it cool, man. Because if you don't play it cool, if you look worried, we're gonna get discovered. So you've gotta pretend like you're happy and everything's fine. You can't have this look of concern on your face." And she instructs him about how to be deceitful. She says, "Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." She also says, "Look, Macbeth, this is one night in our lives that is going to change the rest of our lives forever. We got to be strong. We got to do it this one thing, this one night. Then you'll be king, I'll be queen. Everything will be great then. We will have our sovereign masterdom." So Macbeth then goes off by himself and he starts thinking about it. He starts thinking about whether to kill the king. And he says to himself, you know, if this were just one event, if this were just one time, a one-time thing that I could do with no consequences, if it were the be-all and the end-all, just one little thing, then I'd do it. I'd kill him. I'd do it. He says, but you know, it's not. These things have consequences. And in fact, when we engage in, bloody, murderous behavior like this, it sets an example for other people. And then other people also engage in bloody, murderous events. And in fact, those acts could come back and bite me. And maybe one day I'll be the victim of one of those acts. So it's not a good thing. And the way he characterizes it, he says, if I serve a poisoned chalice to someone else, the even hand of justice will one day force me to drink from that same poisoned chalice. In other words, it's going to come back to get him. So he's thinking, he started to kind of talk himself out of this. So he also says that murdering the king here is doubly treacherous because under these circumstances, the king is in double trust here of Macbeth. Number one, Macbeth is his kinsman and his subject, so he's supposed to protect the king, and the king expects him to protect him. And number two, Macbeth is his host. The king is a guest in Macbeth's house. So as the host, you're supposed to make sure your guests are safe, not murder your own guests. So he's like, this is doubly treacherous. He also says, he's kind of listing all the reasons why he shouldn't do it. He also says, you know what, plus this king is a good and virtuous king and everybody loves him. So if the king is murdered, it's going to spread like wildfire across the entire country and everybody is going to be up in arms and it's going to be a big problem. So he starts to think, you know what, I shouldn't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And he says, the only thing that's motivating me here is ambition. He says, and that's not a good thing because ambition causes you to sort of jump out ahead of yourself and take actions that are rash that you shouldn't take. So Macbeth then goes and seeks out Lady Macbeth. And he comes up to Lady Macbeth and he says, we can't do it. We got to call it off. We can't kill the king. Scrap the plan. Oh man, I can't believe he said that to her. He is going to set her off. I don't even want to look. And that's exactly what happens. He sets her off, okay? So here's what she says. She says, what? What do you mean we got to scrap the plan? What, were you drunk when you had all these hopes for our future? Did you fall asleep and wake up pale and green with fear. And this is what I will always think of our love. Okay, I think what she's meaning is, I'm not sure I can love a person, a coward like this. And it also has sort of a sexual implication as well, meaning, no more nookie for you. But she goes on. She says, are you afraid to act upon your desires? Will you grab the crown like you know you want to? Or will you forever live the rest of your life as a coward? And every time you say to yourself, I want this, you'll always have to follow it immediately with, but I'm too afraid to pursue it. Okay. Stop, he says. Stop, please stop. No more. I can't take it anymore. He says, I am only doing that which is proper for a man to do. By man, he means mankind. And he says, and to go further would mean I'm no longer a man, meaning that, man and humankind has morality. And if you abandon your morality and principles, then you turn into a beast or a monster, right? So he says, I'm only doing what is proper for a man to do. And she says, a man? A man? You are not a man. Okay, so she's attacking him. She says, if you would dare to do what you said you'd do, then you'd be a man. And if you actually followed through with it and went to the next step to actually do it, then you'd be even that much more of a man. Okay? And she says, this is the perfect opportunity. It's amazing how this opportunity has fallen in our laps. We have this opportunity, and now you're chickening out on me right when we have this opportunity to do it. Okay. And she goes on. Now, let me read this to you, although this is a little harsh, I warn you. Let me read it to you, and then I will explain it. So she says, I have given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. Okay? I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. Okay? So basically what she's saying is, I expect you to keep your promise. I would keep a promise to you, even if my promise were an extreme promise. Like if I promised to kill my child, then I would do it, even if it meant while I was milking my child and he was smiling in my face, I would pluck my nipple out of my child's mouth and dash my child's brains out. If that's what I promised to you, I would keep my promise. And thus by implication, she's saying, so you'd better keep your promise to me and go and kill that king. Okay? He's like, wow. Right? He says, you know what? I hope that all your children are boys, because with your metal, you can compose only things that are masculine. It is somewhat of a shocking passage. Actually, let's pause here and consider the role of Lady Macbeth. I mean, there's a lot to consider here, but the central question is, did Lady Macbeth make him do it, or would he have done it anyway? It's similar to the witches. Did the witches plant this idea in his head and make him do it, or would he have done it anyway? So, and I think kind of where you have to come out is certainly Lady Macbeth was indeed a factor, there's no doubt, but it's not like he was this innocent Boy Scout who, never would have done it anyway. He certainly had these thoughts independently. All right, so back to the play. So Lady Macbeth says, okay, so here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. So first, we'll get the king's servants totally drunk, so drunk that they won't remember anything. Then the king will go to bed. Then we'll sneak into the servants' chambers where they're sleeping and passed out. We'll steal the servants' daggers. Then we'll go and kill the king with the servants' daggers. Then we'll go back into the servants, plant the daggers on the servants, and smear the servants with the king's blood. And that way, everybody will think it's the servants who killed the king. And Macbeth says, all right, I'll do it. I'm in, I'll do it. And then he says, so let's go back to the party now and let's pretend like everything's fine. Here's what he says. Away and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what the false heart doth know. And off they go, back to the party. So night has fallen, and Macbeth is walking around his castle thinking about things, and he bumps into a servant. And he tells the servant, "Go tell Lady Macbeth to ring the bell when my drink is ready," he says. So the servant says, "Okay," and off the servant goes. Then Macbeth bumps into Banquo. Banquo, remember Macbeth's best friend. We saw Banquo at the beginning of the play. That's who Macbeth was with when they were fighting the wars and they encountered the witches together. So he runs into Banquo. "Hey, Banquo, what's up?" And he says, "Banquo, good things are going to happen to me. So stick with me. And if you stick with me, I'll take care of you too because you're my bud." And Banquo says, "Yeah, absolutely. I'll stick with you. Of course, only so long as there's nothing that I have to do that would affect my honor." Okay? So it's not an unqualified response that Banquo says. He's not saying I'll do anything. Banquo says, I have honor and I'm not going to compromise my principles. Okay, so they go their separate ways. Good night, catch you later. And Macbeth is walking around his castle, thinking about things, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a dagger appears before him, dangling before him. Okay? It's actually an illusion, a hallucination. But there it is, this dagger dangling before him. And he says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand?" So it's not a dagger that's threatening him or coming at him or pointing at him. In fact, it's a dagger that has the handle towards his hand. It's like offering it to him. "Come, let me clutch thee," he says. So it's, offering him the dagger. "I have thee not, and yet I see thee still." He's trying to clutch it, but it won't grasp. He sees it, but it won't grasp. "Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation, proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw." And he draws his own dagger. "Thou marshalest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use." So he realizes that this dagger is just sort of a vision here. But he says, this vision, this is guiding me. This dagger is guiding me to do what I was going to do. Okay? And then the bell rings. And he says this, "I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, the king, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell." And off goes Macbeth. Okay? So next we see Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is, it's still the nighttime, and Lady Macbeth is standing around kind of wondering, what's going on here? And all of a sudden, Macbeth appears. And he's got blood on his hands, and he's got the bloody daggers in his hands. And he says, "I have done the deed." Wow. And then he starts freaking out. So he starts saying that while he was doing the deed, he wanted God's blessing. He wanted God's blessing while he was doing the deed, but he couldn't get the words out, right? So the implication is, oh my God, he's worrying that he didn't have God's blessing. Imagine that. And he also says that while he was doing the deed, he heard this voice, which was a hallucination, but he heard this voice saying, "Sleep no more. Macbeth has murdered sleep." This is while Macbeth is murdering the sleeping king. And Macbeth has murdered sleep, and Macbeth will sleep no more. Okay? Meaning that he'll never have another good night's rest, meaning, for the rest of his life, he'll always be tormented by this. Okay? So she says, "Macbeth, dude, you are freaking out. You got to snap out of it. Pull yourself together. You are displaying weakness. and you're cracking up in the head. What is going on here? She's like, look, here's what and by the way, what are you doing walking around all bloody with the murder weapons? Okay, that is not part of the plan. You got to wash that blood off your hands. You got to take those murder weapons and get back into the scene and plant those daggers on the servants like we planned. And here's what he says. I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again. I dare not. So he's saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't go back there. So she says, you coward. Oh my God. So she's like, give me the daggers. She grabs the daggers. She says, I'll do it. And she goes back to the scene and she does it. She plants the daggers on the servants and smears them with blood. So a few minutes later, she reemerges, and it's Macbeth and her on the scene. Now she's got bloody hands. Okay? And he's there looking at his bloody hands, contemplating his bloody hands, and he says, will I ever be able to wash this blood off of my hands? He says, is there even enough water in Neptune's great ocean to wash the blood off my hands? And he answers his own question. He says, no, there's not. And in fact, if I were to do that, all this blood on my hands, it would in fact turn the entire ocean red. Okay. Lady Macbeth says, my hands are of your color, but I shame to wear the heart so white. So what she says is, look, buddy, I got blood on my hands too, but I would be ashamed if I were acting as such a coward as you're acting now. So she's like, look, you got to snap out of this, all right? You're losing your resolve here, okay? We've got to clean up here. She says, a little water will clear us of this deed. Okay? She says, it's easy. It's easy. All we have to do is wash the blood off our hands, clean ourselves up here, and then get back into shape, and let's pretend like nothing happened. We've got to do it. Let's get our act together. Okay? So the next morning, the nobles discover the murdered king. It's actually Macduff who discovers the murdered king. We'll hear more about Macduff. And that sets off, a scene of pandemonium around the house. Oh my God, the king's been murdered. And Macbeth, supposedly out of a fit of rage, he grabs the daggers and he murders the king's servants. And what he says was, I murdered the guys who killed the king. They clearly killed the king, and out of a fit of rage, I just killed them. Of course, what he's really done is he's just rubbed out the witnesses, right? They can no longer profess their innocence because now they're dead. But people believe him, okay? And the king's sons, they become worried that this is part of a larger assassination plot, and they worry that perhaps they're the next targets of assassination. So they flee the country. One flees to Ireland, the other flees to England. And there's the sense that, oh, well, since the king's sons fled, maybe they were in on the assassination. And as an indication of Macbeth's darkness and deceitfulness, later in the play, he talks about how he blames the sons. He's fomenting this falseness. Now, of course, he killed the king. He knows the sons are innocent, but he blasts the sons for being liars. And how could they kill their own father and the king? They're terrible people. And he accuses them of lying when they tell the story that they're innocent. It's really, really deceitful. So anyway, so the sons flee, right? The king is murdered. So what happens? Macbeth is crowned king. The plot worked. So Macbeth is now King of Scotland and Lady Macbeth is Queen. So their little plot worked, and it seems like now they've gotten what they wanted. So they decide to host a royal banquet for all the noblemen and everybody to come over to the new King and Queen's place and have a bash. So she is thrilled about this. She's really looking forward to having the party, but she notices that Macbeth, is kind of distant, and he's just not the same guy he used to be. So she goes to him and she says, Macbeth, dude, we did it. It's over. We killed the king. We should now be happy. We've got to enjoy it. You are now the new king. I'm the new queen. Let's enjoy it. Let's be happy. What she says is, naught's had, all's spent, where our desire is got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. So what she's saying is, look, if you spend everything you have to get what you want, and then you finally get what you want, but you're not content, you don't enjoy it, then it was all for naught. We did it all for nothing. She says, I would rather be the guy that we killed than be us who actually did it, because now we're living in doubtful joy. We're suffering now that we did it. And that's no way to live. That's not what we should be doing. So she says, Macbeth, we got to enjoy it. What's done is done, she says. It's over. Now let's get on and enjoy the rest of our lives in our sovereign kingdom here. But Macbeth cannot be consoled. He says, no, it's not done. It's not over. Yes, we killed the king, but now we're faced with all sorts of things going forward. Now we have to defend. We've got a whole bunch of threats. We've got to keep this thing going. And this is a theme in the play that you see over and over and in many different ways, which is that once you start down the path of doing bad or something wrong, it's not just that one little thing. It actually leads to more and more and more, and you have to do more and more evil things. So here's what he says. Hold thee still. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. So what he's saying is, things bad begun. Once you start with something bad, okay, you have to do more bad deeds in order to keep it going. You have to make it strong, so you have to protect it. In order to protect the one bad thing you did, you have to do more bad things. Otherwise, you're going to get caught, and it's all going to unravel. So, he cannot be consoled. He is also saying that, and you know what? I'm guilty. I am racked with guilt over what I have done. And so is she. She's guilty too. Maybe not so much as he, but she feels guilt too. And in fact, they are both suffering from sleep deprivation. Neither of them can sleep. They both have horrible nightmares. And he says, look at these nightmares we're having. We can't even sleep now that we've done this. So that's why I'm upset. So she says, all right, I understand, I get it, but we've got this banquet tonight. Look, let's both be happy. Let's both be happy at the banquet. Let's pretend that we're happy for our guests. So they both agree that they need to do that they will pretend to be happy at the banquet. So then Macbeth starts thinking about his buddy Banquo. Remember Banquo, his best friend? This was the guy that we saw at the beginning of the play. They were fighting together, war heroes together, and they happened upon the three witches together. He starts thinking about his buddy Banquo. And he starts thinking, you know what? I've got some issues with Banquo. My best friend, I'm now starting to see, I've got some problems with him. One problem with Banquo is that Macbeth thinks Banquo kind of suspects that there was foul play involved in the way Macbeth got the throne. And he's a little paranoid here to start, thinking, being suspicious of people, but he's also a little bit right. In fact, Banquo did suspect that there was some foul play. The second problem he has with Banquo is that Banquo is actually an honorable guy. Okay? So, that's perverse that you would have a problem if somebody's good. You think that's a good thing, but not here. So here's what he says. Of Banquo, he's referring to, in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. So what he's saying is, I am afraid of Banquo because Banquo is good. He's got honor. And, what that sort of suggests is, well, because Macbeth knows he did something wrong, and so good people who are going to do things that are right are actually a threat to him. And the third reason why he's got a problem with Banquo is because of Banquo's descendants that they are supposed to inherit the throne. Remember, that was what the three witches said at the beginning of the play. They said, hey, Macbeth, we think you're going to be king. Yay. They said to Banquo, you're not going to be king, but your heirs, your children and heirs will be king. So that now has Macbeth ruminating on this. Okay. He says he's got scorpions in his mind when he thinks of Banquo and his children inheriting the throne. He says, I'm the one who killed Duncan. I'm the one that did the deed. And I'm the one who's suffering for it now too. That all this work that I did in suffering, to think that it's not good enough for me that just I'm king just in my lifetime, but to think that it then goes to the throne, then goes to Banquo's kids. It's like I did all this stuff for Banquo's kids. I want my own kids to inherit the throne. So now he sees Banquo as a problem. So what does he do? What does he do? He decides, you know what? That's it. I'm going to kill Banquo. His best friend. That's it. He's going to kill him. So in another example of just the utter deceitfulness of Macbeth, is he says to himself, I'm king. So as king, I could just kill Banquo right now. Openly, I could just kill him. But he says, I've got some nobles in my court who like Banquo, and I need those nobles politically, so I don't want to upset them. So instead of just openly killing Banquo, I need to do it in a way where publicly I can wail and mourn the loss of poor Banquo when actually I know that I'm the one who killed him. Okay. That is the deceitfulness of this guy. In fact, one thing I think would be interesting is if you're a teacher would be to have your students go through and count the instances of when Macbeth was deceitful or lying. There's a lot of them in the play, both big and little. So anyway, so he decides to kill Banquo. So he calls in a couple of hitmen, and he says to the hitmen, go kill Banquo and kill Banquo's son, right? This is important because by killing Banquo's son, he eliminates the possibility that the throne would go to Banquo's heirs. So he hires the hitman to kill Banquo and Banquo's son. And he says, I'm having a banquet tonight. Banquo is coming to the banquet. Sorry, banquet. So he says to the hitman, get him on the way when he's coming here. Don't do it close to my castle, but get him on the way. So the hitmen said, okay, fine, we will go off and we'll kill Banquo and we'll kill his son. And they exit the stage. And Macbeth says, Macbeth says, it is concluded, meaning he just had Banquo, he ordered the hit on Banquo. It is concluded. Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight. So it's a sort of very poetic way of saying you're going to die tonight. If your soul's going to leave your body, and if it's going to go to heaven, you're going to find out tonight. So a little bit later, this is a little bit of an aside, but I thought it was very interesting. A little bit later, Macbeth hints to Lady Macbeth that he's up to something, and he's referring to Banquo's murder, although she doesn't know that yet. So she says, what is it? What are you doing? What have you planned? And instead of telling her, he says, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to protect you so you don't have the knowledge. You can find out when it's done. Okay? And the reason I think this is tremendously significant, it's not significant for the story or the play, but it's significant in the terms of their relationship, and it ties into the theme. Because what it shows is that their relationship, their love relationship, is disintegrating. Now remember, earlier in the play, they had this wonderful relationship. They were so close with each other. They shared everything. She was his confidant. And now he's not sharing things with her. He's keeping secrets from her. He's distancing her. And this ties into the theme, which is once you start doing something bad, you start on the road of doing one little bad thing, it leads to more bad things. And this is a consequence of the road that they set upon, the unraveling of their close relationship. So I thought that was interesting, but a little bit of an aside. So night falls here, and the banquet starts to get underway. And Macbeth is contemplating the night falling, and he knows what's going to happen when the night falls, which is that his best friend, Banquo, is going to be murdered. So here's what he says in commenting about the nightfall. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, while night's black agents to their praise do rouse. So he's saying in the daytime, you've got all these creatures in the woods that are all good and friendly, but when the night comes, the killers come out and prey upon their victims. So kind of suggesting what's going to happen to Banquo. So the banquet gets underway, and everybody's friendly here, and Macbeth is being friendly, Lady Macbeth is being friendly. It's all good. And then the hitmen show up at the door, kind of at the side, and they say, "Hey, Macbeth, psst, come over here." So they call him over, and Macbeth says, "Did you kill him? Did you kill Banquo?" And they say, "Yep, we got him. We killed him." Macbeth's like, "Yeah, great." So, and what about Banquo's son? They say, "He got away." So Banquo's son got away. So Macbeth is upset about that because now the heir to his, the throne is still out there. And also there's a potential, person who would come back to avenge his father's death. But at least they got Banquo. So Macbeth is happy that they got Banquo. So he sends the hitmen away. Actually, it's Lady Macbeth who says, "Honey, you got to come back to the party here." He says, "Okay." So he goes back to the party. And he's friendly and he's jovial. And in fact, in another example of deceitfulness, he starts saying, "Hey, where's Banquo?" Because Banquo was invited. He was supposed to be there. "Where's Banquo? Where is Banquo? Where is that guy?" And he points to his empty seat. He's supposed to be here. Where is that guy? Well, he knows Banquo's dead. But he's saying for everybody, where is he? And he even says, "Boy, I sure hope that Banquo's late due to being rude instead of something bad happening to him." Again, just, this deceitfulness is amazing, both big and little. So the banquet goes on, everybody's having a good time, and all of a sudden, Macbeth looks over and he sees sitting in his chair, Macbeth is standing now, he looks over and sees sitting in his chair the bloody ghost of Banquo. Okay? The ghost of Banquo appears. But only Macbeth can see him. The rest of the guests can't see him. Lady Macbeth can't see him. Only Macbeth can see the ghost. So he starts freaking out. Macbeth starts freaking out. "Oh my God, it wasn't me. And everybody's looking at him and saying, "What is going on with this guy? Yelling and screaming at an empty chair? What's going on?" So Lady Macbeth, she jumps off her chair and she comes running over and, is telling everybody, it's okay, don't worry. He just gets like this every once in a while, it's fine. And then she rushes over to him. "Honey, you gotta snap out of it." She doesn't know about Banquo, but she certainly knows that he's tormented for other reasons. So she's like, "You gotta snap out of it. You've got guests here. We've got, this party going on. Pull yourself together." So the ghost of Banquo then disappears and it's gone. And so Macbeth settles back down again. He's like, "Okay, I'm fine, I'm good. So she's like, "Okay, it's all good, everything's fine. But the ghost reappears. And again, Macbeth starts freaking out. Again, Lady Macbeth's trying to smooth everything over. It's okay, honey, get yourself together." But she realizes it's too much. This is a problem. So she ends up dismissing the guests. Everybody go home. And the banquet ends on a downward note. So a little bit later, Macbeth is thinking about Banquo's son and how Banquo's son escaped his murder attempt and has survived, and how that's a bummer because now he's in line to still get the throne. And one of the king's men comes in and tells him Macduff has fled to England. Now, Macduff was one of the other nobles in the king's court, and we mentioned him a couple times. Macduff was one of the guys in the king's retinue who came back to Macbeth's house, and in fact, it was Macduff who discovered the murdered king. So I wouldn't say that Macduff and Macbeth were like best friends or anything, but they were both nobles, they're both thanes, they're both in the king's court. They fought together, they believed in their country together, they were loyal to the king together, and all that. So Macduff has now fled to England, and that's making Macbeth start to think about Macduff. Now I got a problem with this guy. Okay, so he thinks, I invited him to my banquet because he invited Macduff to his banquet, and Macduff didn't go to his banquet. Also, Macduff is the noble guy, which, as we know, is a problem. And Macduff has now fled to England. So Macbeth is like, you know what? That's it. I gotta go kill Macduff. Okay? But he's fled to England. He's not in England. He's not in Scotland. He's in England. So Macbeth says, you know what? Let's then go to his castle and let's just kill everybody there. Let's kill his family and all his heirs. Okay? So, a bunch of the king's men go raid Macduff's castle. They find his wife and his young boy, I don't know, 5, 6 years old. They kill his young son and they kill his wife. Okay? So this is a stunning event, and it really signifies here the depths to which Macbeth has sunk. He is now a full-blown tyrant. I mean, it was cruel to kill the family of somebody. He didn't have to do that. The innocent wife and child, he didn't have to do that. So he has now become a full-blown tyrant. And there's a suggestion in the play that it's not just these couple of people that he's killing, but rather he has implemented a reign of terror in his regime throughout the country. So he is, in fact, a tyrant. He has become a tyrant. Okay? So Macduff has, fled to England, and he hears of this news that his wife and son have been killed. And he is, of course, full of remorse. And then he becomes enraged and he vows revenge. So he goes and hooks up with the king's son. Remember back when the king was murdered, when Macbeth murdered the king, one of the king's sons fled to England? Well, Macduff has also fled to England, so Macduff hooks up with the king's son, and they both say, hey, let's raise an army here, and let's march back on Scotland. Let's kick out this tyrant Macbeth and restore Scotland to, its rightful heirs and to a benevolent society. So when Macbeth hears about this, Macbeth back in his castle in Scotland, he hears that these guys in England are raising an army to come march on him. He says, bring it on. He has developed this sense that he is invincible, and he vows to fight until the end. In fact, here's what he says. He says, I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. Okay. Give me my armor. Bring it on, all right? So he is ready to go. But, he also sees the writing on the wall in that, this may not turn out well for him. And he laments the fact that he probably will never live to old age. It's actually kind of a sad passage. So he talks about, when you live to old age, these are your golden years. It's such a wonderful time to live. You have love. You have people who honor and respect you. You're surrounded by all your friends. But he says, he laments that, I'm never going to reach that and experience that in my life. And it's all because way back when he started down the path of doing bad things. So that's sort of an interesting passage. We next see Lady Macbeth. And this is in the middle of the night, and Lady Macbeth has developed a sleepwalking disorder. So we see her sleepwalking. And back in Shakespeare's time, sleepwalking was sort of thought to be some sort of a supernatural activity, right? So all is not well here. In her sleepwalking, she is washing her hands obsessively, like, going through the motions like she's washing her hands. And as she's doing that, she's ranting and raving about being guilty. She's clearly plagued with guilt about all the horrible things that she's done, the murders. She's recounting the murders. She's recounting, Macduff's wife being murdered and how horrible it is. And, saying, oh, there's another spot of blood. I'll never be able to wash this blood off of my hands. This is a stunning reversal because remember, back earlier in the play, it was Lady Macbeth, right, who had the nerves of steel. She was the one who, insisted to Macbeth that he go and kill that king, right? And after he killed, when, Macbeth had the blood on his hands, Macbeth was saying, there's not enough water to wash the blood off my hands. And Lady Macbeth says, a little water, cures us of this deed. So she was saying, no problem, just wash it off and you're done. And now here she is, plagued with guilt. She's descended into madness because she's plagued with guilt. And she is now saying, I will never be able to wash this blood off of my hands. Okay? She also says that, what's done cannot be undone. This is also a reversal. Remember earlier in the play, when she was trying to convince Macbeth to be happy, she's like, look, we killed the king. We're now king and queen. Let's enjoy it and be happy. She said to him, what's done is done. It's behind us. Let's now be happy. And now here she is. She's realized the significance and the magnitude of all these horrible things that they've done. And she now says, what's done cannot be undone. So she, unfortunately, takes her own life. So the weight of this guilt leads her to commit suicide. When Macbeth is told that his wife is dead, he doesn't react in the way you would expect. I mean, remember, they had this deep love relationship, so you think he would lament the loss of his great love. But that is not how he reacts. Instead, he says, well, she had to die sometime. And I think it's not emblematic so much that he just didn't love her anymore, but really what has happened is Macbeth has lost all feeling and all meaning in life. And he says, this is right after he learns of her death, here's what he says. It's a little bit long. I'm going to read it to you and then I'll explain it. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, but signifying nothing. Okay? So I think what he's saying here is life is meaningless. From the beginning of time all the way until the end of time, the future, the only thing that life is you're a brief actor on a stage. You're only there for your hour upon a stage. Yes, you strut and fret back and forth, and your tale is full of sound and fury, but at the end of the day, means absolutely nothing. So Macbeth has lost all meaning in life. He has sunk to the absolute bottom. Nothing means anything to him anymore. He doesn't love, he doesn't hate, he has no fear, nothing. And this sort of signifies that it all started way back at the beginning when he took those first steps down this path of wrongdoing. It has led to just this decline, and now he has reached the absolute bottom where he's lost all meaning in life. So the army in England has now come over, and they are marching in Scotland, and they are marching on Macbeth's castle. Macbeth is fearless. He's convinced of his invincibility, although a bunch of his men are defecting and the battle is not going well. So he charges out and he's fighting the battle, and in the culminating battle, he meets Macduff. Macduff was the noble who he killed his family, killed his wife and kid. So Macbeth meets Macduff on the battlefield. They have a duel back and forth, and Macduff prevails. And Macduff beheads Macbeth. And in the stage at the play, Macduff goes back to see the king's son, who he was with, and he actually brings Macbeth's head on stage, his cursed head. So he's showing this, the king's son, that he has rid the land of the tyrant Macbeth, and now there's no more king. The throne is open, so the king's son is the natural heir apparent here. So the king's son actually takes the throne and is crowned king. And he announces that as king, he will restore the land to the grand society that it was, fair and just and benevolent, and everything will be fine from this point forward. The curtain falls and the play comes to an end. What a fantastic play! 2 thumbs up. There is so much material there. It is so rich. There's so much to think about and talk about. It is amazing. And on so many different levels too. And it's amazing to think that Shakespeare wrote this play 400 years ago, yet there's so much to talk and think about today. It's relevant to today. It's wonderful. So, one level is the personal, individual to you, yourself. You think about yourself. What kind of ambition do you have? And what would you be willing to do in order to get what you want? Would you do things that are wrong? And if you do, will that lead to more things? It's interesting to think about. On another level, there are these great themes in the play to think about. One theme is the deception theme, which is wonderful, the way Shakespeare weaves that through the play on little instances as well as big instances. And there's ones that I didn't even mention. One of my favorites is, at the end, it turns out that Macbeth was actually deceived by the witches, right? So the witches sort of deceived him into believing that he could win the war when, and at the end, he himself acknowledges, oh my gosh, these witches deceived me. So it's great that, all along the play, Macbeth is deceiving all these other people. And then at the end, it turns out that he was, the victim of this grand deception himself. It's wonderful. Another theme in the play is gender themes. There is certainly a lot of rich material there, both masculine and feminine. The masculine side, be a man, and, what that means, it basically means, you should go and kill people, which is, a lot to talk about there. And then certainly the female roles here, there's a lot to think about and talk about there. The role of the witches, kind of doing bad things. And then you have Lady Macbeth, sort of controlling her man and, leading her man to do bad things. There's a lot to think about there. As well as, the theme of this, path of wrongdoing. Once you start doing wrong things, it just kind of spirals and it leads and gets worse and worse and worse. That is a wonderful theme 400 years ago, just as relevant today. On another level, the Macbeth, makes you think about current politicians of the day, current members of Congress. And you see, what have they done to get power? And there are so many instances of these congressmen, taking campaign money from corporations and then, writing legislation for corporations that actually hurt people. What have they done to, what wrong acts have they done to get power or stay in power? And also the theme of deception for our current politicians. I mean, it is amazing to me, some of these members of Congress, that they will just stand up and they will just tell you a flat out lie. It's shocking. It reminds me of the part in the play where Macbeth says he wants to be able to stand up in public and wail and moan the loss of Banquo, where it was Macbeth who killed him. It's very similar to some of these politicians who stand up and just say the opposite of what they're doing. It's shocking, and Shakespeare lays that out in such a great, dramatic way. Yeah, and another aspect of Macbeth that I think is unbelievable is the comparison between Macbeth's tyrannical regime and some of these tyrannical regimes of modern day. For example, take Gaddafi in Libya. It is stunning how similar that is to Macbeth. Gaddafi was, murdering people in his country, and he had a reign of terror, and he had this tight grip on power. But look at his slide. He went down, and of course, he met the bitter end. He was killed at the end in a horrible way, just like Macbeth was killed at the end. I mean, it is amazing. Shakespeare would write this 400 years ago, and it's almost exactly what tyrannical regimes do today. And not just Gaddafi. Think about Mubarak in Egypt, or Saddam Hussein in Iraq, or Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un in North Korea. It's amazing. In December of 2013, he killed his own uncle. Okay, his own uncle was a nobleman in his regime, right? It's very similar to Macbeth killing Banquo. It's amazing how similar it is. Think about Putin in Russia. Putin certainly has some aspects to him that are very much like Macbeth. Okay? So it is amazing how relevant this play is from then until now. I would also say that while I've given you a lot here, and I did go into the play in some detail, I can tell you that I've only scratched the surface. I really gave you sort of the big picture story, hopefully that it would show you what a great play it is and how interesting it is, also enable you to understand it. And so that means if you were to go back and actually read the play or see the play, you would now get so much more out of it. But there's so many things that I didn't cover and that I couldn't cover. You know, there are characters I didn't even go into. There are storylines I didn't go into, and there's the whole language of Shakespeare, which is amazing. You know, much of it was written in rhyme. It rhymes, with the various lines, and also the way he tells the story and lays out the story. The only way to appreciate that is to read it or see it. And yeah, so I would encourage you to do that. It is a fascinating play, and I think you would really benefit and find it very rewarding for yourself. So that's it from me. My hour of strutting and fretting upon the stage in all my sound and fury is over, and I shall be heard no more. So thanks for watching. Take care.